Hello, my name is Joel McLeod.
I'm Roland Tanner.
And welcome to the 905 Roundup for this Thursday. Normally we have a number of stories to talk about, but if you live in the 905 and you live in Ontario, there is really only one issue that anybody's talking about right now, and that is, of course, the fact that this Friday, November 4th, it appears that CUPE is going to stage a protest or a strike or whatever you want to call it. They are fed up with this provincial progressive conservative government and they are not taking it anymore. In case you have been hiding underneath a rock, I'll do a brief Coles Notes version of events. As per usual, contract negotiations came up with between the provincial government and CUPE. The CUPE is the people responsible for maintaining our children's schools. They're the custodial staff, the ECEs, the EAs, the receptionists, and the in some cases the IT people in the board office, all that support staff that makes the school function properly. They're part of CUPE and they're negotiating a contract. On average, the average CUPE member earns about 39 to let's say 41K a year. That's the top end. That's the top end of the owners, and they've been asking for an 11% raise because they haven't seen a raise in a good number of years. This government said, nope, best we can do is 2, and then maybe 1. What's really kind of irked us about it is the fact that this government isn't showing any signs of negotiating with them, and instead has. Well, we'll get into it later, but our suspicion is this entire plan was just to invoke the Notwithstanding Clause, which is what they're doing. Doug Ford and Stephen Lecce have announced that they will use the Notwithstanding Clause to impose a contract on workers that they did not negotiate and steep heavy fines, $1,000 a day, $5,000 or $50,000 a day, I believe. Probably higher than that, I should say, on the unions and the workers. If they go on strike. CUPE says they're doing it anyways. And I'm betting that if you're a parent in the 905 and in Ontario, this is all you're talking about with your friends, your family, maybe even your kids. This has really gotten. I grew up in the 90s, folks. I grew up underneath when Mike Harris was premier, and I went to school and I went to high school with him as premier, and it was a mess. I mean, it was just teachers were miserable, schools were just breaking. I walked out twice as a student to protest the work to rule action that my board and the teachers union was engaged in, and it was a mess in the 90s. And it looks like, hey, we elected a new conservative government, and surprise, surprise, we were back at it with another round of chaos in our school system and whatnot. It's the only difference is that this government has said, no, we're going to use the nuclear option. And that's quoting the CUPE folks. This is a nuclear option to basically say, no, we're going to just take away your rights. And I do say this, like that's not a euphemism. This is essentially they're taking away the right of union members to assemble, organize, and express themselves in a peaceful manner, as is their constitutional right in this country. They're taking it away because Dougie Boy and Lecce Guy are not grown up enough to be at a board table and negotiate in good faith. I need to take a break because I need to catch my breath on this.
Well, this is the religious war that was always going to come with the PCs at some point. When I say religious war, I mean this is the war between the right and the left, between the party of big business and the labor movement in the form of, in particular, the public sector unions. And above all, in Ontario, it always comes back to the unions associated with education. I suspect that the Premier and Minister Lecce would prefer that it was the teachers' unions that were at the forefront of this from day one. It's actually because that allows a whole load of other smears to be thrown around that are harder to throw at CUPE workers. I mean, unfair smears, but smears that we're all very familiar with that get thrown at teachers. And just let's put this in perspective of the absolute hell on earth that teachers, education workers of all sorts have been going through the last few years. They've been frontline workers alongside healthcare workers, alongside people working in factories and places where they could not work from home. They've often been working in situations where where we were all meant to have 6 feet between everything, and well, actually, sorry, your class doesn't allow for 6 feet, so we're all going to be crammed in and try and keep the kids' masks on. And
it should also be pointed out during the pandemic, Roland, EAs would had to go back into the schools when the schools were all closed and we were all at home doing the virtual learning. The EAs went back into the school because the students with special needs would still go into school. So while the schools were closed, the EAs were still literally in the trenches during the pandemic. Sorry, that's
a really good point. And teachers will tell you themselves that the EAs and the other education workers who are represented by CUPE do the toughest, dirtiest, least glamorous jobs, and literally cleaning up behind children who have whatever problems children have, and children are children, right? And they haven't been getting showered in pay rises for a long time. The previous government was constantly kind of saying, well, we need to pay off this deficit, so we're going to have to sort of fasten our seatbelts, or not tighten our belts. And now when the PCs came in, it was obviously going to be a matter of time before they had their war with the education unions, with unions in general. And now here we are. But I mean, I wonder, and I hope that what they've done is massively overplay their hand in going straight to the notwithstanding clause and going straight for, well, let's just suspend let's be clear what the notwithstanding clause is. It's notwithstanding the fact we have a constitution, the province has the right to totally ignore the constitution. So that's what happens when it gets invoked. It is a massive flaw in the Canadian constitution that we're stuck with for historical reasons. But at least most people had the decency up until the last few years to just not damn well use it, because it's an affront to democracy. And when we're talking about the labor movement, which is a fundamental human right of people who work, who give away their labor in return for money, to not give away that work and to try and negotiate better deals. It's how we got to have the decent workplace, or the semi-decent workplace that we generally have today. And there may be problems with the labor movement. There may be problems with certain unions that we may talk about later in this episode. But by and large, the principle of joining unions and of collective bargaining and all those things is one of the most important pillars of our democracy. And this moronic, ignorant, childish, anti-education, anti anything of decency government is just going to kick it to pieces, just because of their, feeling of the God-given right to do whatever the hell they want to when they want to. And it's. I think the level of anger that we're seeing. Okay, Twitter, right? We have to take it with a pinch of salt. People are using phrases like general strike, but it's like, well, if you're not going to have a general strike, if you're going to have a general strike, what justifies it? Well, just completely destroying the principle of negotiated of the labor movement basically existing. Maybe that's the point where we really need to get going.
Here, I'm kind of formulating my arguments here, and I kind of want to get at the end. I kind of want to say what are our options going forward, because I feel very strongly on this, that this is an affront to our democracy. So I'm going to start off with criticizing Doug Ford and Lecce for this. This is clear. I think it's blatantly clear at this point. There was no good faith argument here. Both sides were. There was no counter offer. No movement to really seem like, well, we'll give you something, but you got to give us in return. I didn't see any of that from either side on this. But I don't even know what the negotiations were. I don't think the negotiations were that clearly weren't that productive, because I would suspect that this was a foregone conclusion. I find it's incredibly hypocritical for Doug Ford at the moment, who is currently in courts fighting a court order to have him come up to Ottawa to explain his decision making during the Emergency Act to the Emergencies Act inquiry about the yahoos who try to take over our country in Ottawa in February. He's afraid of doing that, yet he has no problem using this cudgel of a power to take away the bargaining powers and the rights to expression that union members have in this province. This man is an agent of chaos. He's not a premier. He's not a leader of anyone that I can see in this province. It is troubling to me that this isn't an isolated incident. This is what conservatives do. And I mean that small c conservatives, not just the federal and the provincial counterparts, but I mean just conservative movements across the world we're seeing is they come in and they're bulls in a china shop. Let's just destroy everything because we can remake it in a manner that benefits our few friends. It is so maddeningly frustrating because we could have avoided this if part of this, I think, goes to the people on the left for just not getting organized and fighting with the gloves on and one hand tied behind your back because you had to be, I don't know why, but like Stephen Del Duca was a horrible choice for the Liberal leader. Andrea Horwath should have won, but she couldn't put the puck in the net, and now we're stuck with this. Like this, I'm ranting a bit, but I find that they're a bit on the hook for that. And
if we want an opposition to this government in Ontario at the moment, then we can't look to the Ontario Liberals who have no leader. We can't look to the NDP who have no leader.
No. We're on our own.
We are on our own. But it comes back to the old cliches of where does power lie? Well, ultimately, power does lie with the people because there's more of us than them. And if we all stay at home, they'll bloody come round soon enough. It is that simple. And it does, talk of general strikes doesn't come up very often. Before we
get onto that, though, I do want to lay some of this blame also at Leona's doorstep.
I'll talk about Leona all day and all night because those assholes.
I find that hypocrisy to now come out with a statement saying, "Oh, we demand that you honor the bargaining rights of Cubans." You endorsed this clown show because you were spiteful to Stephen Del Duca. That's what this was about. They're spiteful to Stephen Del Duca because he upset their pride when he was a Liberal minister. So we're going to spite him and get Doug Ford. He. You laid down with the devil himself, and you got fucked. Don't come crying to the rest of us. And don't put up this false piety to the rest of us to say, "Oh, we're solid with the labor movement." No, you're just as dirty as Doug on this one. Hold your heads in shame.
Yeah, Leona. And the communications person of Leona was whose surname happens to be Mancinelli. Coincidentally, I don't know if she's related to Joe Mancinelli, but it's an awful coincidence. Was saying, sort of protesting on Twitter about an hour ago. There was a lot of people saying some very funny things, like just because we support the Conservatives doesn't mean we support, a tax on. It's like, no, you cannot support a Conservative party in North America or in Europe or anywhere and then claim that you don't know that a large part of the reason they exist is to destroy the union movement. They are the parties of business. They are parties of opposing people organizing together for better pay and conditions. For Leona to claim that and then, sort of clutch their pearls and say, well, how dare you say that we did something nasty when we backed the Conservatives? Give me a break. And the two other unions who the big public, private sector unions, labor unions, backed the Conservatives, they should be ashamed of themselves as well. The reason, Leona will claim that it's because of things that the Liberals did. Well, yeah, it is things that the Liberals did, but it's also because of a pissing contest between the Carpenters and Leona over who gets to do what, where, and Stephen Del Duca was in the Carpenters Union. So it's gang warfare, to be honest, between those guys, and they are a national disgrace. They are not working in the interests of working people. They're working. And Leona is basically one of Ontario's biggest developers. They build big buildings. They do all the things that developers do in terms of donating to good causes, making sure they're getting their pictures taken in the newspaper. All wonderful public relations stuff. It's fantastic.
On that note, I find this interesting because Doug Ford in the legislature today, when he said, he did what every conservative does. I stand with the workers, not the workers' leadership. The union leadership needs to change because they're crooked and corrupt. They don't actually talk about what the workers need. And I realized what you just said, it clued into me. Why does he think that way? Because when he went to Leona, when Buddy, that was the attitude. Oh, we don't care. We just want to screw over our competitors. So we'll give you an endorsement. We'll help you get reelected because you're going to give us some jobs that float some union dues up to us. Great, thanks. It's a greasy mess, and we're all.
And we need to be careful of not accusing people of behavior that we don't have evidence for that could be illegal.
No, I am paraphrasing and I am editorializing.
No, and we don't need to, because the behavior that is completely out in the open, in public, is bad enough. They backed the Conservatives. They basically became part of the anti-labor movement of the party that works to lower wages, to treat people badly. That's very first act was to cancel increases to minimum wage, and then to claim, oh no, we're good labor guys. Right. No, give me a fucking break. They are a disgrace. And when I say they behave like gangs, I'm not saying they are. I say they behave like it, and that they have wars with other unions, and they make lots and lots of money from building things. And then they basically got both sides of the pie here, which is a very interesting, convenient sort of legal arrangement, where on one hand, you're controlling the people who are allowed to work on building sites. On the other hand, you're actually building buildings. That's a great arrangement. You can work that one out. I mean, it's fantastic. But
So are we done ranting now? Can we get the solutions?
I don't know what the solution. I mean, the solution is that.
I think there are two solutions here. There are two solutions. One, both require courage on two different parties, but there are two ways out of here. One is the federal government can allow there's talk of the Justin Trudeau and the federal Liberal government. Once the law is enacted, the federal government has the power of disallowance to annul a provincial law, which means they could come in and say, I'm going to annul the federal government says, I'm going to annul this. They don't do it because, it's clearly a stepping on of crossing provincial federal jurisdiction. However, these aren't normal times. Justin Trudeau has come out and said he's not in agreement with the use of the notwithstanding clause in this manner. He doesn't, this isn't wrong. This isn't right. This is wrong. However, I also find that Justin Trudeau is a bit of a coward when it comes to doing what is right. He didn't stand up to shoot down the notwithstanding clause being used in his home province of Quebec when they wanted to take away the rights for people to wear religious garb in public space. Will he do the same thing here?
Well, my understanding is the federal government can't do it. I mean, the provincial governments are far more powerful in terms of what they can do to just overrule other jurisdictions, people with other powers. The federal government cannot, under the Constitution, just cancel a provincial act. It can't. It can may be able to do that with the territory. It can't do it with the provinces, which is more the proper way that things are supposed to work in a democracy. But it wouldn't, two wrongs don't make a right and all that. For the federal government to make an unjust and undemocratic act, to undo an unjust and undemocratic act by a provincial government, get us very far. But anyway, I don't think that can actually happen.
Well, it pretty much can. Section 55 and 56 of the Constitution Act entails the powers of reservation and disallowance.
Right.
So the question, but these are powers that are not supposed to be used. The mandate is to ensure constitutional compliance. It's a bit of a check and balance. Will it use here? I don't know. Who knows? I mean, that might go up to the Supreme Court to say, can this be done this way? Which might be a good thing. I just think that the argument could be made that this was not the intended use of the notwithstanding clause. Clearly, it's not meant to be used as a negotiation tactic.
The notwithstanding clause is there to keep Quebec happy, and it was a compromise made with Quebec to keep Quebec in Canada. It's
not a tactic to be used as a negotiation in your negotiations with unions. This is a huge overreach, and it's such a dangerous precedent. I think at the very least the federal government should step in challenge it on, like try to use it just to push it to the Supreme Court so we can get an actual ruling on this. Can we actually use the notwithstanding clause in this manner? This isn't this is something we need clarification on. This cannot be used as this kind of willy-nilly. Maybe, I just don't want to spend extra money. It needs to be cleared up. I think if Justin Trudeau did it, my hat would go off to him because the guy finally shows some courage and some actual leadership in this country. That being said, will he? I don't know. Probably not. I'm not holding my breath on that one. The other option is what's now trending on Twitter, #general strike, which would be a daring move by the other unions in this province if they do indeed say we're going on a strike, a general strike, because I think it's in their best interest too. Clearly, any bargaining that a union does going forward underneath this government does going forward is now at jeopardy. Even if it's the private sector, the government can step in and use the notwithstanding clause to basically force a union back to work or to accept a deal that is not in their best interests. And which I firmly believe that this government, Doug Ford and whoever is in charge of the ministry at the time, but Doug Ford would entirely do that. He is entirely on the side of the big business, the billionaires in this province. He would totally do it. So it is entirely in a union's best interest to go on a general strike, in my opinion, right now, because if Doug Ford gets away with this, there is no good faith bargaining ever again in this province. Truly, there isn't.
My guess is that it won't happen because there'll be a loss of nerve, and that the democracy will take a major step back as a result. Because I do think you're right. This is the Ontario PC's attack on the unions that was inevitably going to happen after they won in 2018. It's what they do. It's why they exist. And much as people will argue that the unions are strong, they're actually very loath to kind of take the nuclear action and to outright defy the law. Now, CUPE said they're going to defy the law, and that's like I'm frankly surprised, but also pleased that they're going to do that, because ultimately unions didn't come into existence legally. They came into existence because people organized and made it happen and demanded that they exist to the point that employers had to accept their existence. It is a reminder to us all of why the labor movement actually exists, or how important it is, and where we were before it existed. But I hope they do have the stomach to really talk about making strikes that work in defense of not just the CUPE workers, but in defense of the right to strike, which is ultimately what's at stake here. And I think I should also shout out the Liberals in the previous government and their increasing use of back to work legislation. That also is an affront to democracy. I didn't agree with it at the time. I didn't like it. This is the next step on top of that. It's like, well, people go on strike, we'll just pass an act to make them go back to work. And I think, again, it's a fundamental human right to withhold your labor and to negotiate collectively. Those are human rights, not just rights that we've established in Canada, but rights that everybody around the world should have. So that was part of a slippery slope. And anybody who thinks that the education unions or the teachers have had it all their own way for long enough realize that it's a long time since it's got a big pay rise. In fact, education workers have seen their salaries eroded significantly over recent decades, successive governments. So
I used to be on the side of those who criticize like teachers pay, the teacher pay too much. The problem, and I have come around in my old age. I'm going to say, no, the question isn't why are teachers paid what they're paid. The question is, why aren't you being paid what you're worth? The question that you should be asking isn't, it's if you're at your job right now and you're like, well, I'm barely making ends meet. I'm not making, I have to work twice as hard to make half as much as a teacher. Ask yourself, why is that? Why is it that your boss, if you think you'd work twice as hard as a teacher, and you're earning half as much, ask your boss, why is that? And that's to me, that's what it comes down to. Is we were taught, we were encouraged, oh, don't ask that question. You should be thankful for what you got and go home. And you know what? There's something we learned from this pandemic is that we have a worth. There are people who are quitting, who are quitting jobs because they realize, well, I'm getting treated like garbage where I work. My boss doesn't care about me, and he or she's not going to pay me a good wage. I got to find my own worth somewhere else. That's why we had, remember the great resignation, the great quitting, the quiet quitting and all that stuff. That's what this is about, is people saying, no, I am not going to take, I'm done with the Oliver treatment of going up to you, holding up my cup, saying, hey, please, sir, can I have some more? You know what you're worth? They're going up for it. And quite frankly, if you're pissed off at that, then ask yourself why. Why is your boss treating you? If you hate your job so much, then you hate coming into work, you hate punching in your time card, you hate getting your job assignment from your boss because your boss treats you like garbage, your boss doesn't pay you enough, or whatever have you, then ask yourself, why isn't your boss paying you that much? And
it's for people who have, anybody listening who has a problem with what unions do, and I have problems with individual unions. You just spent 10 minutes bitching about LiUNA, and that's a big problem.
Yeah.
However, the principle is, because I'm exactly the same as we all have, lawyers are another sort of industry that get a lot of stick. But, when stuff goes wrong, we all turn to our lawyer because we need someone who's going to argue our case. Unions do that on a collective basis. They argue the case of their members. It is absolutely that point. Now it's like, people say, well, teachers get paid too much or whatever. It's like, well, if they've negotiated certain rights and certain salaries and certain whatever, and the government comes along and says, we want to give you less now, what person on earth says, okay, so I'm doing the same work today and you want to give me less to do that? I mean, which is basically what's been happening over the last decade. And sure, I mean, the Liberals put things in much nicer, more friendly terms in terms of basically being pro-education and even pro-teacher. But, they certainly spelled the end of McGuinty's career. We have to remind ourselves, like, just because someone has an effective union and they've negotiated some better situations, which, by the way, are still being eroded, we should never hold that against them because they've done a better job than we have negotiating decent conditions for ourselves. It's like we should all be pulling ourselves up to that level, not trying to pull other people down to our level. This is you said before we came on, I'm now going to steal the phrase that you used, which I think came from Twitter anyway, but it's like, now we've got all these morons talking about freedom in Ottawa, who, meanwhile, we've actually got a real issue of real freedom, of a real fundamental right, of a real fundamental freedom that we have as citizens to provide or withhold labor, and the sweat of our brows and all the rest of it. We do need to defend it because it's in all our interest to do that. And I think Ford and Lecce I think they're so, and this happens to every government after they've won 2 elections, particularly when they won a second election very easily. They think, well, hey, look, we're popular. We just got back in. We hardly had any opposition. Now's the time to take on these bloody unions. We've got the support of the people supporters, everybody's sympathetic. Everybody wants their kids back in school. And I think, there certainly is a large contingency of people who will roll their eyes whenever talk about teacher strikes or education worker strikes comes up. But I don't think they've got this right at all. And I think, again, by going nuclear right from the get-go, rather than trying to go through an extended process of negotiation, I think they've maybe thrown out whatever sympathy they had. Let's put it this way: anything that has LiUNA, the PCs, and bloody Warren Kinsella are all on the same side will have me on the other one.
I would say this: they think they have the public on their side because they won the most seats in the legislature. However, if you did the math, only 17% of all eligible voters. Oh yeah, elected these clowns to.
It's a huge mistake that governments make after they get elected. They're thinking
they don't have a mandate from the people to do this. At least to use the Notwithstanding Clause. I'm all in favor of finding that middle ground between 2 and 11%. There's a huge swath of middle ground that you could reach a compromise on, that both sides might walk away upset, but at least you have an agreement and everybody goes back to work peacefully the next day. This is an unacceptable line. This is a line that you cannot, like, that. This is what gets my gears going, is the fact that this is an egregious overstep of a fundamental right that we should all cherish and take seriously. This is it, people. This is the actual impeachment of our rights. This is what those clowns in Ottawa thought they were fighting for. This is it. This is the actual erosion of our rights. And you know what? Those convoy knuckleheads are, they're nowhere to be seen on this one. Where are they to come down and march with CUPE on Friday and to protest this? Where are they to make those announcements? They're nowhere, because they are cowards. They're selfish sons of bitches. And that's where is this where we're at in this province, is that we take those clowns more seriously. Yet when this government plots, and I do say it's a plot, to erode the constitutional rights of unions, to collectivize, to mobilize, to effectively argue for a decent wage. It's not even like they're asking for, I need to fund a vacation home in Muskoka. It's 40K a year is the top pay grade. And they're wanting to they don't want to have to worry about putting food on the table and a roof over their kids' heads. Is that really where we're at? Like, we can't look them in the eye for that. And I don't care about, what's coming down, the next union that's have to negotiate. I don't care. This is the fact that this group of people are holding on to a thread, and we can't find anyone, especially after this government posted a surplus. That's the other thing. $2 billion surplus this year. They fixed the deficit problem, apparently, yet we can't figure out how to pay our employees a decent wage. This is unconscionable. This is a disgrace. And if you're listening to this and you're rolling your eyes at us, cancel it, unsubscribe, because this is we're not going. There's nothing you can say that's going to change our mind. This is a government that is cruel.
I'm sick.
Cruel to its people.
I'm sick week in, week out, and talking about rights being eroded and taken away. It's significant rights, not little stuff. But the Conservatives always talk about freedom and that we should have less legislation, not more. And then when something doesn't go their way, they legislate the opposition out of existence. And I'm sick of it. And I'm sick of it happening all across the world, not just in Ontario, in Canada. And I'm sick and tired of the kind of world that my parents fought for, actually. I mean, kind of. My dad was technically in the Second World War. But the world that they created in the post-war kind of reconstruction in places like in Canada and in Britain and in North America and around the world, being eroded by these right-wing jackasses motivated by just naked greed in the pocket of the development industry in Ontario, in the pocket of big business interests, absolutely divorced from kind of proper democratic oversight, with a bunch of robots on their backbenches. And then at the same time, the opposition parties having basically given up the ghost and gone home because, well, we all want to run for mayor this week. So we're abandoned by the Liberals, we're abandoned by the NDP. The Greens have one guy, and who the hell else is gonna do things other than we the people, And it reminds me, actually, just back, because we think now that we the people have no power. And I keep on thinking, as we come out, the situation we are with COVID now is an interesting one. I mean, and it's kind of I know there are people listening to this podcast who feel very strongly that we should all still be masking. I know there are other people who've just who've just feel like they've given up. And I respect both those points of view. But what I really think is the most important and interesting thing out of this whole thing is when we closed down that first time, on whatever it was, Friday the 13th, 2020, March 13th, 2020, or whatever it was, it's pretty much the day that everybody said, okay, we're staying home. No government did that. It wasn't the federal government, the provincial government. It was we the people who said, we're going to stay home. The government followed us in then declaring lockdown and all the rest of it. But we did that. And it's kind of we the people who, one way or the other, have created the situation we're in now, because we certainly didn't get the leadership from any government in a really persuasive way during COVID. So it showed us who actually matters when everybody decides, or enough people decide that something really matters. We will move mountains overnight. And we did on March the 13th, 2020. I think that's something we need to be reminded of, because we're so used to feeling powerless and hopeless in the face of the forces that act on us.
You know what? Like, we're on our own. I truly believe for the next little while. We got to take actions and stand up and just say enough is enough. I don't know if we'll do it. I don't know if the unions will have the nerve to do a general strike, to follow through with that. I just don't. This might be it. We might just have this continuous slow erosion of freedoms and rights and whatnot by conservative governments for the foreseeable future, because we are either complacent or afraid or both. I want to think that we have some courage. I want to think that we're stand up with those who are being crapped on by this government and by previous government. I said it before, conservatism is a cancer on this country. It is. There's not a province in this country that is ruled by a conservative that, as far as I can think, maybe out east in the Atlantic provinces is the one lone hope, but the rest of us are all getting screwed over. At some point, something's going to break. I don't know what, but we'll wait and see. I say we're coming up on our time for this episode, so I'm going to leave it at that. If you like what we say, let us know. If we're wrong, let us know. But I'm betting that there's more people who are thinking like us out there. So I'm hoping that's the case. Thanks very much, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
All right.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns, or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.